Alright, so today I'm going to talk about the pulmonary function test that I had done yesterday. If you ever need to have this test done, you'll know what to expect because I did not know what to expect and it was way more intense and time consuming than I thought it was going to be. So let's get into it. Before I forget, I want to show you baby. She's been stealing my chair that I'm in right now. We had this extra office chair that we had bought at our local college's move out event for $10. And so she got her own chair and she has been loving it. Okay, so this test I thought was going to be pretty chill. My dad had said, oh, like at my work, we used to do pulmonary function tests. He was like, oh, you just like breathe into a tube. It's fine. I was like, okay. Super easy. We're good. They had very specific instructions before this test. I wrote it down here, so I'm gonna read it off because actually the morning of I forgot and they told me not to have any caffeine. And while I do not drink coffee, I do eat chocolate. And I had a little keto bark that I'll eat in the morning because it's supposed to keep you in ketosis. And it just helps me to wait a little bit longer before I need to eat breakfast. So I ate that. They also told me not to exercise before. And I was like, does physical therapy count? And they were like, yeah, probably don't do that. And forgot that too and did a little bit of that before as well. But the other things that you're not supposed to do is do not smoke or drink alcohol for several hours before the test, which, you know, I don't do, so that's fine. Avoid eating large meals within hours of the test, although I don't remember them telling me that. Now, I was kind of already stressed going into the building. I have gone into this building several times before, but for some reason I think they had the heater on, and so when we walked into the lobby, the doors opened and I was like physically assaulted by this horrendous noise. And with my autism, my overstimulation with sound is like physically painful, so I heard this crazy noise and I like physically like recoiled like I was in pain. And my dad was behind me and he was like, are you okay? I don't think he knew like what was going on. And I was like, it's the sound. So I was like this. And then I like sped up walking and we got away from it and it was fine. But that really took me off guard because my noise sensitivity is pretty intense. So we got there about 10 minutes early. Usually they say to arrive 15 minutes early. Now they were on lunch break, so we just had to wait outside their closed door. And then we went in and she was like, okay, you know, it should just be a couple minutes. Let me get the room ready. It was probably like at least 10 minutes. My dad was like, how long does it take them to get this room ready? Apparently her computer had died, so we actually had to go to a different room. Now I wear a mask wherever I go because I have to be COVID cautious because my health is so bad to begin with that any like additional sickness would really put my body over the edge. So I have to be very just safe with going out and having to wear a mask everywhere I go. So when I went in, I was expecting like, okay, I'm gonna have to take my mask off, but I was really hoping that she would be wearing a mask and she was not, unfortunately. So I asked her, hey, you know, advocating for myself, could you wear a mask? And she was like, okay. And so she went over and she got this mask that like, it was a weird one where you had to like tie it, and she tied it super loosely. So she was just like breathing out the bottom the whole time. I was like, okay, it's fine. So anyway, we go into this room and there is this tube looking thing that I'm gonna have to sit in. And I'm like, uh-oh. So with my autism, I've had meltdowns in the past. We didn't know they were meltdowns, but I've had meltdowns when I've had to go into automated things that like I don't have control over, that are kind of like robots. So like a car wash. Absolutely had a massive meltdown when I was a child in a car wash. When I go into Giant, some Giants have a big robot, will freak out and panic. And so I looked at this thing being like, oh my God, because it looked like this tube. I did not take a picture when I was there, but I did find a picture. This is what it looked like. So this tube-like thing is what you sit in. And the door like fully closed at one point. So I was like, uh-oh, slight panic. I was expecting the test to be, like I said, really simple, but it took probably at least a half an hour. So she said, we're gonna go through a bunch of different tests, and I also have a really hard time with my brain fog with instructions. So I was getting a little nervous because she would say, this is what's gonna happen and this is what I'm gonna tell you to do. But it was really good because she would tell me ahead of time and then she would tell me while it was happening. And because I had that heads up ahead of time, it was a little bit easier for me to do it while it was happening. So she had me go and sit in the tube, and only one test did she actively close me into the tube, which again, if I had any sort of claustrophobia, I think I would have really freaked out, but I don't. But I did hear it lock and that started panicking me, and then the machine was making some noises and that was panicking me a little bit. So anyway, go back to the beginning. There were a bunch of different tests and they were all testing different parts of your lung capacity. So different parts of the lung is what she was saying. So some of the first ones that we did, so you'd be breathing through this machine. That was the other thing. She gave me little nose clippers so that you had to completely block off your nose. And that really panicked me because I have a hard time with breathing. That's why I got the pulmonary test done. Yeah, my body just kind of panicked when I couldn't breathe through my nose, and I had to remind myself, breathe through your mouth, breathe through your mouth, it's okay. So there's a lot of taking that clip on and off in between tests. But anyway, the first couple tests, you just kind of breathe normally through the tube, and then a couple of them she would say, okay, I'm gonna ask you to breathe like a super deep breath, or one of the tests was, you know, like a quick little breath in, not super deep, and then you like breathe out as hard as you can. So there's all these different combinations of like a really long gentle breath in, and then a really long gentle breath out, or a really sharp quick inhale, and then push out as long as you possibly could with the breathing. There was all different kind of combinations of that. Another hard part for me was with my Sjogren's, I have dry mouth. And so it wasn't probably more than 1 or 2 tests in, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, do you happen to have any water? I think she might have even offered water. I was like, yes, I really need water, because my mouth was just starting to get so dry breathing solely through the tube. And the tube was probably like that big. It was a pretty big tube, and so my mouth was just getting so dry from solely breathing through this tube. We did several of those tests where she would tell me the when to inhale, when to exhale. A couple times I didn't have my mouth fully tightly on the thing, and so I was letting a little bit of air out around it. So we had to do, I think it was just 1 test over again because of that. Sometimes it was really stressful. She would tell you, breathe out, breathe out, breathe out, breathe out, breathe out, and you were just like, ugh. Like trying to go as hard as you could, but you had no air left in your lungs is how it felt. And so one of those times she said I actually inhaled a little bit accidentally. I think it's just your body just like being like, we don't have enough air to do this, and it's panicking, and then it's like trying to breathe. All of that happened, and there were a bunch of different tests for that. And then she said, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna give you albuterol, which I actually do have an inhaler already because I have exercise-induced asthma. So when I do anything physical, which I normally can't do, but now that I'm on the cephalexin right now and have a little bit of physical energy, I've been able to do a couple things. So like going for a walk or something, I need to take that inhaler. So I am no stranger to albuterol. But it was not given in an inhaler, it was actually given in a nebulizer. Now, I'm also no stranger to a nebulizer. I went to a functional medicine doctor several years ago and they gave me a nebulizer treatment. I can't remember what medication I was taking through the nebulizer, but I would have to do this. I think it was twice a day, and you had to like wash the whole thing, and it was like a 15-minute treatment of breathing in and out with this tube, and it had a weird taste. It was tough. So I had done that treatment years ago, and so I knew what a nebulizer was. So she said it takes about 5 minutes to fully nebulize the albuterol, and it's basically just the albuterol mixed with like water, so it's this mist. So it looks like you're smoking. Basically you're letting out this what looks like smoke, but it's this mist. So it's kind of this like loud-ish machine. You just have to breathe in and out using this little mouthpiece, and then this one had like a thing out the back for you to breathe out. Mine looked different when I had it, and so you just hold it. My hand was also getting really tired holding this thing up for 5 minutes just because I don't have the muscle mass to do stuff like this, and there was nowhere to like rest my arm. I mean, I was physically holding this thing up for 5 minutes. So did that, and then she had me repeat a couple of the tests. But actually, before I repeated the test, she closed the machine. Actually, I think this was before the nebulizer. She closed the machine, locked me in, and she was like, can you hear me? It was hard to hear, but I was like, yeah, the order is a little, I mean, I was like so panicked that the order of this, it might be a little out of order. Oh yeah, so the test in the closed tube was one where you couldn't breathe. So what you had to do was you had to take a short breath in, short breath out, short breath in, short breath out. And she was like telling you to do it at her rhythm, and it actually closed off your ability to breathe. So that was scary too, because it felt like you physically couldn't breathe. So when you went in, every time you went in, I mean, there was like no air to come in, and that was really scary. And that was when you were in the like vacuum chamber or whatever. Like I said, I just kind of blacked out for so much of this, and then I realized like, oh, I should really be paying attention and remembering these things and not dissociating so that I can tell you all about it in case any of you need to experience this test. But I'm not gonna lie, for stressful experiences, especially medical stuff, I do dissociate a lot because it's easier to numb and dissociate from my body than to fully experience things that are stressful. That is a survival technique and a coping mechanism, and one that I am working on, but sometimes it is all about survival, and it's okay to just do the thing that's going to get you through. So anyway, then we did the nebulizer. Then we did 2 other tests before she repeated another test to see how I did after I took albuterol. But between that was some tests where she said, you're actually going to be breathing in some gases and then they settle out in your lungs, and we see how you do with that. And the gases she told me were methane, a little bit of carbon monoxide. I think my reaction to carbon monoxide was like, what? And so she was like, it's a very small amount. It's not bad for you at all. And I was like, okay, I'm trusting your word on this, right? And then they test your like full lung capacity once they've like had everything like settle in. And that was one where you actually had to hold your breath. That one really sucks. You had to like suck in the air. And then she was like, then I'm gonna count down from 5. But she waited a few pauses before she started counting down. And then you tried to like let out air as fast as you could. It was so many instructions. That was honestly the hardest thing for me too, in addition to the like encapsulated thing. And then we repeated some tests. But the other thing was you had to wait 4 minutes in between the last few tests. So that's another reason why it took a lot longer, was because I think they're waiting for the albuterol to settle. I think they're waiting for the other gases to settle or something. I don't know, but there was several tests where we had to wait 4 minutes in between at the end, which was kind of annoying. So that was my experience with the pulmonary function test. She said my results will immediately be on the portal, but they're just going to be numbers, so you're not going to understand any of them. And then the pulmonologist will look over everything and then send you the finalized like written report in the portal. It was back to me like that night, like later that day. So it's a very quick turnaround time, and my test was normal, which I thought it would be. And again, the reason I had this test was because I started having breathing problems after I took hydroxychloroquine, which is Plaquenil, for my Sjogren's, and I started having breathing problems that were the exact same breathing problems as I had after I took a quarter dose of the COVID vaccine in 2022. And it took me so long to not feel like there was as heavy of an elephant on my chest. That's the thing, I have a heavy elephant on my chest. It feels like my diaphragm is having a hard time working too, and the longer I talk, the harder it feels like it is to get in air. Anyway, they wanted to do this test to test my lung capacity. I felt like my lung capacity was fine. It just feels like this heavy weight on my chest. So that is the reason I got the test, but the results were normal. So that's good and bad, right? Because we still don't know why I'm having trouble breathing. But my breathing has gotten a lot better since going off of the hydroxychloroquine. But it's not back to the normal it was right before I started taking it. So that's what sucks. So then also after the test, she said, you know, you might feel a little dizzy or lightheaded. And I already have those symptoms. I already have with my orthostatic intolerance. I have kind of dizziness or lightheadedness. And with my neurological symptoms that started like 1.5 years ago, my sense of balance is really, really bad. So I was like, uh-oh, that's not good. I was so shaky after the test too. I don't know if it was from trying to hold that thing for 5 minutes or just the intense inhaling, exhaling, but my hand was like probably shaking like this for a while after the test, which was scary. And I showed my dad, and he was like, that is really concerning. And I was like, yeah, it is what it is. So it was more stressful on my body than I originally thought was going to happen, but I survived it. All was well in the end. But anyway, so that was my experience with a pulmonary function test. If you have to have this test done, I just hope that this video helps you to prepare. I was prepared going into it. I thought I was prepared, that it was just going to be a really easy, fast blow into a tube and I'm done. And it wasn't. And so I kind of wish I'd done more research, because I did zero research before. And so I hope that this video helps tell you what the experience is going to be like. So good luck. If you have to have this test done, you got it. And I will see you all in my next video. Bye everyone.